The apartment was small, just a single tatami room, a kitchenette, and a bathroom tucked behind a sliding door. Tatsuya had never needed more. It was quiet, tucked on the third floor of an aging building in Fukuoka, shaded by overgrown cherry trees whose petals fell silently in the windless spring. He liked the stillness. After long shifts at the warehouse, he'd return to his apartment with a warm bento shower and watch reruns until he drifted off. But lately, something about the stillness had begun to feel off. It wasn't the usual weariness or the loneliness he'd grown accustomed to. This was different. It felt watched. At first, he thought he was just tired, but small things started to go missing. A carton of milk, half full the night before, was empty by morning. Chopsticks he kept perfectly lined beside the sink had been disturbed. He began to doubt himself for retracing steps he didn't remember taking. It unnerved him enough to start photographing things before he left for work. The arrangement of his futon, the angle of his slippers, the contents of his fridge. Each night he would return home, compare the photos, and find tiny inconsistencies. He spoke to his landlord, but the old man only laughed through his smoker's rasp, claiming the building was so old, even the ghosts were probably homeless. Tatsuya laughed too, but his smile faded the moment he stepped into his apartment that evening. The air felt warmer, denser, like someone had just exhaled behind the door. He bolted the lock. Then, as if pushed by something primal and quiet inside him, he searched the room. He checked every corner cabinet and cupboard. Nothing. He got on his knees and lifted the futon frame. The space beneath was shadowed and silent, barely a foot high. His flashlight beam swept across cracked tatami mats and dust, nothing else. He scolded himself for being paranoid, then went to shower. As the steam thickened behind the glass, he didn't hear the soft creak of the closet sliding open, nor the light shuffle of weight shifting under the futon. But when he stepped out wrapped in a towel, he paused. The slipper he always left by the bath faced the wrong way. A chill ran across his neck. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he lay awake, barely breathing, listening. At 2:18 a.m., he heard it, a faint sound, like fabric brushing against floorboards. Not from outside. From inside the room. It came from just beneath him. The sound was delicate, so subtle that he questioned whether it was even real. But it came again, unmistakable this time. A soft, dragging shift. Like someone shifting slightly to get more comfortable. Directly beneath him. Tatsuya didn't move. He lay rigid on the futon, heart hammering against his ribs. The moonlight cast long shadows across the ceiling, and the air had turned cold, unnatural. Minutes passed, then an hour. At some point, exhaustion overcame fear, and he drifted into a shallow, uneasy sleep. When he woke, the sun had already risen. Morning light spilled through the rice paper windows, weak and pale. He rolled off the futon and knelt again, staring at the narrow space beneath. His hands trembled as he reached for the edge of the frame, but he couldn't bring himself to lift it. Not yet. He called in sick and went to the electronics store. By noon, a small motion-sensitive camera was perched in the corner of the room, its lens angled directly at the futon. He left for a few hours, just long enough to give whatever or whoever was hiding a chance to move. When he returned, the apartment was untouched, but the camera light was blinking red. Tatsuya sat cross-legged on the floor and replayed the footage. For the first few hours, nothing. Just a still frame of his room, the curtain swaying faintly. But then just after 2 a.m., the futon frame shifted, barely just a small jolt. Then a hand emerged from beneath it. Thin, almost skeletal fingers clutching at the edge of the floor. The footage showed the hand slowly pulling the rest of a body out from beneath the futon, a woman, impossibly thin, with long tangled hair hanging over her face. She crawled silently, serpent-like, across the tatami floor, rose to a crouch and shuffled toward the fridge. She opened it gently, took a bite from a rice ball, drank from his bottle, then sat cross-legged in the dark, chewing slowly with her back to the camera. She remained there for over an hour. At 4:03 a.m., she crawled back toward the futon, slid under it, and disappeared entirely from view. Tatsuya didn't scream. He didn't call anyone. He simply stared at the frozen frame of his screen. A grainy image of his room with him sleeping above something. Someone. When the police came, they were skeptical. But when they lifted the futon, they found her curled like an animal, her eyes wide, staring at them without a word. She had been living there for nearly a year, using his home like a cave, hiding when he was near, moving when he was gone, and watching him sleep every night. Even after she was taken away, Tatsuya never stayed there again. Sometimes when he closes his eyes, he sees her crawling quiet as dust just inches away from his own heartbeat. And he wonders how long it would have gone on if he had never noticed the misplaced slipper. Story 2. Phone calls from the dead, USA. The metal twisted with a scream as the train cars buckled and split steel, groaning beneath the weight of the disaster. When rescue crews arrived at the scene just north of Glendale, California, the mangled wreckage of Metrolink 111 was still hissing, steam dust and silence stretching over the ruined tracks. Among the wreckage was a man named Charles Beck. He never made it out. Hours later, as the evening crept over the city and the families of victims gathered around radios and television screens, Andrea Charles's fiancé received a call. It came from his number. She froze, staring at the screen, heart catching in her chest. She answered. Nothing, just silence. Then the line dropped. She called back, but it went straight to voicemail. 15 minutes passed. The phone rang again. This time it lasted longer. She could hear something, a faint shuffle like wind over gravel. Or was it breathing? She whispered. Charlie, still no voice. Just soft static whispers, as if someone were trying to speak underwater. Andrea wasn't the only one. Over the next several hours, Charles's phone dialed out 35 times. His mother, his sister, his son. Each of them described the same chilling silence, sometimes a gasp, sometimes soft static, but never a voice, never a word. At first, they clung to hope. Maybe he was alive, buried in debris, using his phone to call for help. Rescue crews were notified. They changed the search grid, focusing near the last cell tower ping. But the hours dragged on. Midnight passed. The calls continued. Each one feeding the desperation, each one ending in that unbearable silence. His sister reported hearing what sounded like weeping. His mother thought she heard her name whispered faintly before the call ended. When they finally found Charles, it was just after dawn. His body was near the front of the train, pinned between crushed seats and twisted steel. According to the coroner, he had died on impact instantly, without a chance to move. His phone was never found. The calls stopped the moment his body was recovered. The investigators had no explanation. The number had clearly registered outgoing activity. But from where and how? Andrea would later say the worst part wasn't the silence or the false hope. It was the final voicemail she received at 4:38 a.m. 1 minute of silence. And then, just before it cut off, a faint whisper that still haunts her sleep. "I'm still here." The funeral was quiet. Closed casket. The air felt heavy with something unspoken, as if no one quite believed he was truly gone, or perhaps they feared that he wasn't. Andrea stood by the casket longer than anyone else. Not crying, just listening. After the service, the calls were over, but the feeling wasn't. Andrea started dreaming of tunnels and broken glass. Sometimes she'd wake up with the distinct sense that someone was sitting at the edge of her bed, watching, never moving, just present. She tried to explain it to friends, to family, even to Charles's son, but no one wanted to hear it. Everyone needed to move on. Grief plays tricks, they said. The mind fills in the gaps, but then strange things started happening. Her phone would ring once in the middle of the night and stop, always at 2:46 a.m., the time of the crash. Sometimes she'd find the call log, empty though she'd felt it vibrate, seen the number flash across the screen. It was his number, every time. Once, in a half-asleep state, she answered out of reflex. Nothing came through. No static, no breathing. Just a deep, unnatural silence, as though she'd opened a line between worlds and was now waiting on the edge of something that shouldn't speak. She stopped answering after that. Then came the message, not a voicemail, but a text. Short, just 3 words. "Under the seat." Andrea froze. It had come from Charles's number. No contact name. No trace of the message once she tapped it. Just gone, as if it had never been typed. But the words were there, burned into her mind. She called the lead investigator the next morning, nearly begging him to check the wreckage again. At first, he resisted. Everything had been cleared. But when she mentioned the location under the seat, something shifted in his tone. He said he'd look. Later that week, he called her back. His voice was tight, uneasy. They had found something small, a metal wedding band, scratched and embedded beneath the frame of the train seat where Charles had been pinned. It had never made it to the evidence list. No one had seen it before. Charles had never worn it. They weren't married yet, but he'd shown Andrea the ring months earlier. He planned to surprise her after the move. She never received another call after that. The number was finally disconnected, the account formally closed. But every now and then, when she dreams, she hears the phone vibrating somewhere in the dark. And a voice, soft, broken, familiar whispering from the static. "I never left you." Story 3, The Grinning Man in the Mental Hospital, Texas, USA. The hallways of Ridgewood State Hospital always seemed colder during night shift rounds. Concrete walls, long stripped of their sterile white paint, carried whispers in the dark. Not voices, but something more ancient, more ambient. Things creaked when they shouldn't. Lights flickered even after they were replaced. But by 3 a.m., even the most skeptical staff moved faster. Donna had worked there for 7 months. She didn't scare easily. Not from patients muttering into their hands, not from screams echoing in the upper wings. But tonight felt different. Off balance. Like the building itself was listening, She pushed her medication cart down Wing C long-term care. All the doors had reinforced glass windows and triple locks. Inside room 209, she paused. Mr. Baird, a mute catatonic, hadn't moved in weeks. Yet through the window, she could see him sitting upright, staring at the ceiling, lips curled in a slow, unnatural grin. She unlocked the door. The room stank of antiseptic and unwashed linens. Mr. Baird didn't blink. His body was still, but his face. That grin was far too wide. His gums were pale, stretched thin over yellow teeth like skin over a tight frame. Dana called his name. No reaction. She waved a hand in front of his face. He didn't flinch. Slowly, carefully, she stepped closer. Something in her gut begged her to stop, to turn around and call someone. But she was trained. This wasn't the first time a patient had snapped out of stupor. Then, without warning, his eyes snapped downward, locking onto hers with sudden inhuman clarity. She stumbled back, heart punching her ribs. His mouth twitched again. The grin didn't widen. It deepened as if something inside was pulling the edges from within. His jaw creaked softly. Not open, just tense. Holding something back, the worst part wasn't the smile, but the awareness behind it. Mr. Baird, who hadn't spoken or moved in months, was looking through her as if he knew her name without hearing it. Dana backed toward the door key, fumbling in the lock. Just before she turned the handle, he whispered, "A dry, cracking rasp, you're next." She fled, left the meds behind. The other nurse on duty thought she was overworked, suggested a break, maybe a transfer. But that night, when she reviewed the security tape, the feed from room 209 was blank. Just static flickering softly across the screen, and in the reflection of the glass behind Mr. Baird's shoulder, there was another face, not his smiling, just the same. They placed Dana on leave the next morning. Too much stress, they said. It was common in her line of work. She didn't argue, but she didn't sleep either. The image of that face, not Mr. Baird's, but something behind him, just barely visible in the glass, it haunted her. Pale, distorted. Its mouth stretched impossibly wide, lips too thin to be human teeth, too many. It didn't blink. It didn't move. It only smiled. Dana returned to the hospital 3 days later, not to work, but to retrieve her things. She moved quickly down the halls, keeping her eyes low. Wing C was off limits now. They'd said Mr. Baird had fallen back into his stupor, but the lock on his door had been changed. No one explained why. She took her bag from the break room but paused before leaving. The monitors for the security feeds were still on. One of them flickered room 209. Static again. A soft, slow pulse like an old TV struggling to hold signal. Then just for a moment the feed cleared. Mr. Baird was seated in his usual spot, but someone or something stood behind him in the dark. It wasn't a trick of light. The shape was tall, almost too tall, with shoulders that sloped unnaturally and limbs that seemed too long for its frame. Dana felt her blood freeze as the figure leaned forward, impossibly slow, and whispered something into Mr. Baird's ear. And then he smiled, that same grin, stretched, strained, consuming. The screen snapped back to static. Dana stepped back from the monitors and nearly tripped over a rolling chair. She steadied herself, heart pounding, and looked toward the hallway. Nothing. No one. But behind her, on the glass of the break room window, was a smudge not from fingers, but lips. A greasy outline of a mouth grinning wide, as if someone had pressed their face against the glass. From the inside. She left Ridgewood that day and never returned. Years later, rumors still lingered. Nurses spoke in hushed tones about room 209. Some said it was cursed. Others called it a mirror room where something watches through the glass, mimicking faces, choosing who to follow next. Mr. Baird died months after Dana left. Heart failure, they said. Peaceful. But the coroner noted something odd. The man's face jaw, locked stiff, was frozen in a grotesque, impossible grin. Muscles torn at the corners of his mouth, as if he had been smiling long before he died. And buried deep beneath his fingernails were tiny flakes of glass. Story 4. The Mirror Guest. Nantikafam. London, UK. The flat was narrow and cold, tucked between two aging buildings in a quiet corner of Islington. Emily liked it for its simplicity. One bedroom, a modest kitchen, a clawfoot tub, and just enough distance from her neighbors to sleep without hearing footsteps above or below. She first noticed the smudges 2 weeks after moving in. Faint impressions on the bathroom mirror, as though someone had exhaled against the glass and drawn a curved line with a fingertip. The shape was subtle, just a soft arc, almost like a smile. She assumed it was her. Maybe condensation from a rushed morning, a towel swipe that hadn't fully cleared the surface. But each day it reappeared precisely the same, a gentle fog, always in the same position, low on the mirror, slightly to the right. And every morning, the house felt just a bit colder than the night before. She began cleaning the mirror obsessively, using sprays, cloths, even vinegar. The glass would shine for hours until nightfall. Then the mark would return. By the 5th day, the arc had deepened, stretching further across the mirror like a grin, growing wider in secret. Emily stopped turning off the bathroom light. She started noticing other things. Tiny, almost imperceptible shifts. Her toothbrush moved half an inch left. The toilet lid slightly ajar when she remembered closing it. A bar of soap freshly damp, though she hadn't touched it. At night, the creaks in the walls began to sound less like settling wood and more like movement. Not footsteps exactly, but a dragging weight, a pull, a presence too careful to be clumsy, too patient to be anything living. Still, she didn't leave. She told herself it was stress. London's pace had worn her thin, and the mind had its own way of pressing back when stretched. Then on the 9th night, she woke at 2:14 a.m. Not from a sound, but from cold. The flat had no central heating, but this was different. This chill had weight like ice resting against her chest. She sat up, blinking toward the bathroom where the light was still on. The mirror was fogged. From across the room, she saw it clearly. A face, or rather the impression of one. Mouth, wide eyes, hollow, grinning just beneath the surface of the glass. She stood, stepped forward slowly, breath shallow. The bathroom door creaked open wider as she approached, though she hadn't touched it. And just before she entered, the light flickered once. The reflection of the hallway behind her showed nothing, but in the mirror, just over her shoulder, something smiled back. She didn't scream, didn't run. Instead, Emily stood frozen in the doorway, heart pounding like fists against glass. The grin in the mirror remained wide, unnatural, stretched too far, as if the mouth had been carved open at both ends. She spun around. Nothing behind her. Just the hallway quiet and dim. When she turned back to the mirror, the face was gone. The glass was clear. No fog, no mark. Only her own pale reflection, trembling and wide-eyed under the cold white bathroom light. That night she moved her mattress into the living room, but it didn't help. At 2:14 a.m., the next night, the mirror fogged again. Even with the bathroom door shut, even with towels stuffed into the crack beneath it. The fog came anyway, and with it the grin. She bought a camera the next day. Small, motion triggered. She set it up discreetly on the sink facing the mirror. She needed proof, something tangible. She needed to know if it was real or if her mind was finally splintering. That night she left the lights off, shut the door, crawled into her blanket in the living room, and waited, hands gripping her phone. At 3:07 a.m. the notification came. Motion detected, bathroom. She hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Then with a breath held too long, she opened the app and pressed play. The video was shaky at first, grainy in the dark, bathed in night vision green. For a few seconds nothing happened. Just the quiet still room. And then the mirror fogged slowly from the center outward. As if something inside it were breathing, a shape emerged. Not a face this time, but hands, long pale fingers pressed against the glass from behind, sliding along the surface, leaving streaks. The outline of a forehead, eye sockets, that smile. Then the figure pushed forward. The glass bulged outward as if softening under pressure. Not cracking, not yet, but stretching like a thin membrane. The figure's grin widened until the corners vanished from frame. The hands scraped upward, and for a moment, the face in the mirror looked directly into the camera. The video ended there. Emily left the flat at dawn. She didn't pack. When she returned weeks later with the landlord and a removal team, the bathroom mirror was missing, shattered completely. The shards were still in the sink, some embedded in the wall. But no one could explain the handprint inside the wall, behind the mirror, 5 fingers stained deep into the plaster, as though something had been trying to get out. And maybe, just maybe, it had. Story 5. The Cursed Chair. Chair of Death. England. In the dim back room of the Thirsk Museum, beneath the creak of ancient beams and dust-choked rafters, sat a wooden chair that no one dared touch. Suspended by chains high against the wall just beyond reach, it hung like a warning, not a display. A plaque beneath read simply, "Chair of Death. Do not sit." It had belonged to Thomas Busby, a 17th century criminal and murderer, who was said to have cursed the chair with his dying breath before being hanged outside the inn where the chair once stood. Since then, the stories had clung to it like cobwebs, tales of soldiers who died in war days after sitting in it, construction workers crushed in freak accidents, and skeptics who laughed while seated and never made it home. Amelia, a museum curator in her late 30s, didn't believe in curses. She believed in preservation, not superstition. Still, the chair unsettled her, not because of the stories, but because of how quiet that room felt. Even on busy days when tourists filled the rest of the museum with voices and footsteps, the room with the chair remained unnaturally still, like sound didn't dare linger. The museum's director, a soft-spoken man nearing retirement, insisted the chair be kept up high. Better to leave legend alone, he'd once said, eyes distant. Things that want to be forgotten tend to Remind. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Amelia stayed after hours to inventory artifacts. She walked past the cursed chair as she always did, clipboard in hand, noting the humidity level and the angle of its chains. But something caught her eye, a scuff mark just beneath it, faint, almost like the impression of a shoe. She stepped closer. The dust around it was thick and undisturbed. But there, it was a single heel-shaped mark. She looked up. The chains were still taut, the chair unmoved, yet as she stared at it, her skin prickled. Not from cold, but from that strange pressure, like a held breath at the base of the spine. She took a step back, and the overhead light flickered once, buzzing sharply. Then came a sound she hadn't heard in that room before, creaking wood. Slow, deliberate, a shift in weight. She froze, gaze locked on the chair. It hung as it always did, suspended by steel bolts drilled into stone. But the scuff was still there. And now, beneath the quiet, something else, a low groan, like an old man adjusting himself in his seat. The room for a moment felt occupied. Amelia backed out of the room. Slowly, her breath held tight behind her ribs. The door shut with a click that echoed too loudly. She stood in the hallway for a long moment, listening. Nothing followed. No footsteps. No voices. Just the distant sound of rain tapping against the leaded windows of the museum. That night she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the scuff beneath the chair. She told herself it was old someone from before they raised the thing off the ground. But she couldn't remember it being there the day before. She would have noticed. She was sure she would have noticed. The next morning, she returned early to check the security footage. The backroom camera had been grainy for weeks. The lens fogged from some internal damage no one had gotten around to fixing. Still, she scanned through the overnight hours. The footage glitched, buzzed, looped oddly, but one frame caught her breath. 2:46 a.m. The chair wasn't there. Just a patch of stone wall where it should have hung. 2 frames later, it was back, swinging slightly, as if someone had just stood up. Amelia showed the director. He watched in silence, lips pressed into a thin line. When the clip ended, he spoke without looking at her. "We raised it for a reason," he said softly, "and chained it to remind it." Later that week, a volunteer 19, bored and defiant, snuck into the back room after closing. He'd bragged to co-workers that he'd touch the infamous chair, maybe even sit in it if he could reach. Dared himself with shaky laughter. The next morning, his car was found wrapped around a tree less than 2 miles from the museum. No signs of breaking. His phone, recovered from the wreckage, had a final video. It was dark, grainy, shot inside the museum. The camera panned up toward the suspended chair. A whispering laugh, a jump cut, then a blurred image. The chair tilted forward, chains groaning, the boy gasping, startled. The feed distorted as the frame shook. At the very end, just a sliver of footage before it cut to black. A shadow in the corner. Not his. Something tall, crooked, watching. The museum sealed the room the next day. The chair remains chained high now, behind locked glass, never cleaned, never touched. Yet sometimes staff still hear it creak after hours, like wood straining beneath invisible weight. Like someone shifting, waiting, smiling in the dark. And below the glass, the scuff mark never fades,